Welcome learners to your first video lesson. In this lesson we will do a summary of the last lesson. And this is the first chapter of your book Flamingo. This story was written by Alphonse Daudet, who was a French novelist and short story writer. This short story is based around the Franco-Prussian War, which took place between 1870 and 71. In this war, France was defeated by Prussia, now Germany, and after defeating Prussia, the two border towns, Alsace and Lorraine, were occupied by German forces. And after occupying these two towns, they passed an order that only German could be taught in these towns instead of French, the mother tongue. When this order was passed, everybody in the towns was affected, and this story talks about how even young children were affected and what happened to people, how people felt about not being able to speak their own mother tongue. The story begins like this. Franz is going to his school and he's very frightened because he had ignored his teacher's, Mr. M. Hammel's instructions to read the rules of participles. Even though he was afraid, he was going to school, and while going to school he could see a lot of temptations inviting him to spend the day out of doors instead of going to school and get a scolding. The soldiers were drilling and he could see the birds chirping at the edge of the woods, and then the day was bright and sunny, but he had the strength to resist all these temptations and hurried off to school. And while going to school, he had to go past the town hall where some notice boards were stuck up. And through these notice boards, all the news had come to them all those years. So while walking past it, he could see that a crowd was gathered there near the bulletin board, and he thought something must have happened once again, because that was his experience. So, but he didn't stop there, even though he worried that some bad news might have come. While he was hurrying past the town hall, somebody called the blacksmith of the town, called Wachter, called out to him and said that he didn't have to hurry because there was a lot of time. And Franz thought that Wachter was making fun of him, so he kept on walking to the school, and as he was already late, and while going to the school, he thought that he would take advantage of the normal noise that can be heard in a school, and taking advantage of the noise and commotion, he would be able to get to the classroom without the teacher noticing him. But to his surprise that day, the school was as silent as a Sunday morning. Nobody was moving. All the learners were seated on their seats, and the teacher also, Mr. M. Hammond, was also walking up and down with in a solemn, in a very grave manner. And when he reached the door, the teacher, he was expecting to get a scolding, but surprisingly, Mr. M. Hammond was very kind and gentle with him. He said to Franz to go to his seat, and then after he had settled down, Franz could see that his teacher was wearing his best dress. This best dress was normally reserved for Sundays and for inspection days. And apart from this surprise, he could also see that some old villages, townspeople were sitting in the back of the room, and one of them was Hauser, and then the other was the former postmaster, the former mayor, and everybody had a primer in their hands, and the primers were kind of old, very old. And while he was wondering about all these things, M. Hamel started talking. He announced that he was going to give them the last French lesson, because they had orders to teach only German in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine. And when this announcement was made, Franz was surprised beyond belief. He could not believe his own eyes. They were like a thunderclap to him. And then he realized what was actually happening at the town hall, in the town hall, why the people were gathered around the bulletin board. So when he heard this announcement, he could immediately feel sorry for not learning his lessons, for wasting his time seeking birds' eggs and sliding on the Saar and everything. All the books that seemed like a nuisance a while ago seemed like his friends all of a sudden, old friends. And M. Hamel also did not look any irritable. He did not look cranky. He did not look short-tempered or bad-tempered. So he could realize that the old man sitting behind had come to say their goodbye to M. Hamel, and he would also understand why M. Hamel had put on his best dress. The other old men were saying goodbye to him and to their motherland, and this was their way of saying thank you to Mr. M. Hamel. So while he was thinking about these things, his name was called and he was asked to recite the rules of participles, but he wasn't able to do it. But instead of getting a scolding, he was told to sit down, and then M. Hamel talked about who was to blame for their for his inability to read and write France. He said that the French have the habit of procrastinating things for later, and that is one of the reasons that the French could not read and write their own mother tongue. And he also blamed himself for not teaching them when he didn't feel like. Whenever he didn't feel like, he would declare a holiday. And then parents are also to blame to some extent because they would send their children to work instead of learning in the school. So after that, he talked about the French language. He said that it was one of the most beautiful languages in the world, and he said that it was the most logical language in the world, and also said that as long as a nation held on to their language, they could not be enslaved. And after this, he opened the grammar lesson, which was followed by a lesson in writing. And when the grammar lesson was taught, Franz could see that he could understand everything very clearly. Now he realized that he didn't understand only because he never paid any attention. So while this was going on, Franz was thinking about the pigeons that were flying around. He thought that the Germans would make them also sing in German. And as they were riding, he could see that M. Hamel was very sad and nostalgic. He was staring at things, looking at things, as if he was trying to remember everything in his mind before leaving the town. And then the babies had their and then they had their lesson in history, which was followed by the babies, young boys, chanting their alphabet and the numbers. And while these lessons were going on, the clock struck 12, and at that time the Prussian trumpets blew, and it was like the signal to stop teaching and stop teaching French and start a new lesson. So when these trumpets were blown, and Hamel stopped teaching, and he was so overwhelmed with emotions that he was choked. He could not say anything. He simply went to the blackboard and then wrote Vive la France, which loosely translated means Long live France. And then he stopped and gestured to the learners that class was dismissed. He could not even speak these words. Thank you.